What sounds like fiction but is actually a real historical event. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a novel in 1838 in which 4 shipwreck survivors, at the point of starvation, choose to resort to cannibalism. So they kill the young cabin boy, Richard Parker, and eat him. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank. 4 crew members survived. At the point of starvation, they killed and ate the youngest of them, Richard Parker. Operation Mincemeat. The Allies planted a dead body with fake battle plans to trick the Germans into thinking that the Allies were going to attack Sardinia when they were in fact going to attack Sicily. They built an entire life for this dead, fake, military man, dumped him in the ocean, and successfully distracted the Germans. https n wikipedia.org wiki operation_mincemeat. The death of Ken Rex McElroy. He terrorized Skidmore, Missouri for decades, stalking, assaulting, murdering and raped 2 14-year-olds who were his wives. He had an expensive attorney, so he was never charged. The law never helped the poor town. One day, the town gathered for a meeting on how to deal with McElroy. Details get a little vague here, but apparently someone alerted the room that McElroy was in the bar up the street. Quietly and calmly, everyone got up and walked over to the bar. As McElroy got into his truck, someone shot him in the back of the head. The town just went back to their business. When the witnesses, like the entire town, were questioned, everyone claimed they didn't see anything. No one has ever been arrested. The Soviet scientists starving to death saving the seed bank of Leningrad during Hitler's invasion in the winter of 1941-42 despite it being full of corn, wheat and potatoes. Wojtek was a bear who fought Nazis in return for cigarettes and beer. He didn't die until 20 years after WW2. The Bone Wars. 2 rival paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, were in a race for academic clout. So they both took off to places like the fossil beds of Montana and Utah to try and dig up as many dinosaurs as possible before the other guy. But they didn't stop there, and hired spies and saboteurs to impede the other's work, as well as trying to pass off sloppy or fake skeletons sometimes. The overwhelming majority of iconic dinosaur genre that we know were either first discovered or simply got a lot of new samples to work with, and were made iconic by the amount of publicity they received. This includes Triceratops, Stegosaurus, some remains of Tyrannosaurus, Apatosaurus, and many, many more. This is also where the Brontosaurus confusion comes from. One of the scientists, I forget who, had already discovered Apatosaurus. The other then discovered a new skeleton of the same dinosaur, but intentionally put a skull from a different species, Camarasaurus, onto that skeleton and tried to pass it off as a new species entirely, Brontosaurus. The fake was unveiled pretty quickly, but the name stuck. More recently, however, we have a lot more tools to distinguish smaller features from bones. And it was found that the skeleton that was originally passed off as Brontosaurus is actually barely different enough to receive its own genus. And the name Brontosaurus was revived. I've always thought that this could make a fantastic show, especially if it includes dramatized flashbacks to how the dinosaurs in the skeletons died. Edit. The Wikipedia page's intro describes it very nicely as well. https n wikipedia.org wiki bone_wars. Edit. It's worth noting that the Bone Wars have had a massive positive legacy on paleontology as a field, but left both scientists financially and socially ruined. An excellent bittersweet ending. The CIA was researching psychic abilities for 30 years as a way to spy on the USSR. After 30 years, the program was terminated, and their conclusion was that psychic powers probably don't exist. Edit. The actual conclusion was that the evidence for remote viewing was unfalsifiable, and therefore unprovable. Many of the more promising results were believed to be caused by information leakage, meaning that test subjects had prior knowledge about the subject they were asked about. They were unable to verify any of their results because of this, and even if the psychic abilities were real, they were unreliable at best. Edit 2. The codename for the project was Stargate. You can find the documents on the CIA website here. The escape from Antarctica by the members of the Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. The stuff they went through was unbelievable. Their boat, the Endurance, was crushed by ice floes. They were stranded on the floes for over a year in temperatures well below freezing. They then took to 3 boats around 22 feet in length across the Antarctic Ocean looking for land. There were about 10 men in each boat. They missed reaching land by just a few miles at times. 2/3 of them got stranded on Elephant Island surrounded by ice while one of the boats went out in search of rescue. That boat made it through the Drake Passage, one of the deadliest places in the ocean. All but 3 of them got stranded with little food and water, while the 3 men who left became the first people to cross South Georgia on foot. They found civilization, rescued the men who came through the Drake Passage, waited months until they could rescue those on Elephant Island. Every single person who came on the initial voyage survived, with the worst lasting consequence being a single foot amputation. Apparently, death from laughter is an incredibly rare but a completely legit cause of death. In the 3rd century BCE, Chrysippus, a Greek Stoic philosopher, died of laughter after he saw a donkey eating his figs. And Chrysippus is not the only isolated case. Among the few other cases, a 5th century BCE Greek painter, Zeuxis, is said to have died laughing at his painting of the goddess Aphrodite, for which an old woman who had commissioned the painting had insisted on modeling. Also, Cleopatra, the ruler of Egypt in the 1st century BCE, claimed that her retainer died laughing at her husband's death. According to the linked Wikipedia article, the most recent case is that of Ole Benson, a Danish audiologist, who saw a funny scene in a comedy film and laughed so hard that his heart rate rose to a point where he had a fatal heart attack. In 1989, from what I understood from reading up on this topic, it's not the act of laughing itself but rather a fatal repercussion from a fit of laughter, such as cardiac arrest, asphyxiation or aneurysm, which causes death. For instance, Ole Benson suffered a heart attack as a consequence of the terrible fit of laughter he had. It's possible that such was the case of Chrysippus, and others, as well. I always thought of, "I'm gonna die laughing," as a hyperbole, and I myself use it quite liberally. But I guess every hyperbole has a grain of truth to it. Unsinkable Sam, a cat that survived the sinking of 3 different ships during World War II. https n.m. Wikipedia.org wiki unsinkable_Sam. The battle for Castle Itter near the end of World War II saw US soldiers, French POWs, and the German army fighting on the same side to hold the castle against an SS tank division. To make it even weirder, the French prisoners included several prime ministers and a tennis star. An English king named Ethelred, later called the Unready, took some troops to defend against a Viking invasion. The weather was bad, so a lot of the Vikings' ships crashed as they were landing. Ethelred thought that it would be dishonorable to attack them as they were stumbling onto shore. So he kept his troops back until the Vikings had a chance to get together and form proper battle lines before he attacked them. The better prepared Vikings then won the fight and slaughtered a bunch of Ethelred's men, and he and the rest were forced to run away while the Vikings went around pillaging. President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845. His pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing loudly. The Great Stink was an event in central London in 1858. The hot weather exacerbated the smell of untreated human waste and industrial effluent that was present on the banks of the River Thames. https n. Wikipedia.org wiki great_stink media file. The _silent_highwayman. JPG. Joshua Norton was just this random crazy guy from San Francisco who hated all this political nonsense that was going on at the time and figured he could do the job better at it himself. And thus, the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico was born. While he held no real power, the people liked him so much that they treated him like royalty anyways. Any currency issued under his name was treated like real money at many establishments. One day, he was arrested by a private security force because of his mental health, which enraged practically all of San Francisco. The police chief let him go because he had committed no crime. And Norton gave an imperial pardon to the guy who arrested him. After this incident, any police officer Norton passed would salute him. Another time, when a riot had formed and was getting pretty violent, Norton simply stood in front of the mob and calmly prayed, "Which mang to disperse the mob." And that's not even a fraction of the crazy stuff that he did. In 1971, a teenage girl named Julianne Kopka was on a plane that was struck by lightning and disintegrated in the air. She plummeted 3,000 meters strapped to her seat, and landed in the Amazon rainforest. Her mom had been on the flight with her, and Julianne searched in vain for her mom. But Julianne was the sole survivor of the crash. She survived 11 days alone, treating her maggot-infested wounds with fuel and using tracking techniques her father had taught her, before she found a boat that she used to make her way back to civilization. What an absolute legend. Edited for clarity. There are 3 separate defenestrations of Prague. In 1980, Lake Peigneur in Louisiana drained like a bathtub with the plug removed. Oil drillers on a rig in the lake had hit a mineshaft below the rig. Barges. A tugboat and part of a nearby island got sucked into the largest man-made whirlpool ever. A Russian Tsar had a bomb thrown at him. Avoided it. And thought it was a good idea to stay there to look at the damage. Enter second guy with bomb.